Hello and welcome back to Crushing Comics, the show where I fall in love with my comic book collection all over again. You see here this vast gap in a shelf. It's one that is almost totally unpacked. Last episode I plucked off the package from it, so let it see what is in this bundle of book as we get ever closer to being halfway done the unpacking of my collection. That's crazy, halfway. That means this is probably going to be as many episodes more as there have been so far. I guess I don't have to worry about what season 2 is going to be quite yet. Although I am thinking about it. I can't help it. Let's see. Ooh, okay. Some core X-Men here. We have the Inferno prologue and the Inferno crossovers, but not Inferno itself. So Inferno Prologue. It's called Inferno Prologue. What does it have to do with Inferno? Virtually nothing. So we've talked a little bit before about the oversized collection of X-Men, and that it started out with, in 2009, where is it? Mutant Massacre, this slim book here. And then the period directly after Mutant Massacre represents the biggest gap still in color X-Men collections as of the recording of this video. Then after that comes a book that we haven't cracked open yet called Fall of the Mutants. Fall of the Mutants, people think it was a crossover, but it never really crossed over. It was more of a theme of the books each going through their own sort of dire set of circumstances, New Mutants, X-Factor, and Uncanny X-Men, much in the way that 2009's Dark Reign was Marvel going through a dire set of circumstances in all of their titles. And in each book, the teams kind of wind up in a very different place than they began. In X-Factor, they fight Apocalypse, and Archangel kind of comes back to them, but as this Horseman of the Apocalypse. In X-Men, the team is presumed dead, and I don't really know what happens in the New Mutants issues. I'm not really sure. So this is the material that directly follows that, so it's not as though it's like necessarily setting up the themes of Inferno, but it was Marvel plugging a gap and deciding how are we going to market the gap plugging and calling it the Inferno Prologue. It's a prologue in that it explores the world without X-Men, because the X-Men are presumed dead after the big blowout in the end of Fall of the Mutants, and so that has an effect on the New Mutants. It has an effect on X-Factor. Even though X-Factor weren't known to the X-Men at this time, they certainly were aware that their old friends were out there in the world, living and doing their thing. And then the X-Men themselves, at this point, are they based in Australia? I think this might be when and they're alive and well in the Australian outback. So it's three really big changes of status quo for the teams, and there is some good material in these issues. It's not just kind of this, it's not just random, and the thing for me that's really great in this run is that it has the X-Men's run-in with the Brood for the first time in like 50-ish issues, and it's a really good one. It's a throwdown with the Brood like in the middle of a city, and it has some really great X-Men action. Of course, the X-Men, nobody even realizes that they're there really fighting the Brood, because they can't even be seen, I don't think, on video surveillance at this point. And it also has the X-Men's first encounter with the island of Genosha, Genosha, I never know, which, 30 issues later results in their involvement in Extinction Agenda. So this is a really fun run of books. If you don't have Fall of the Mutants on one side and Inferno on the other side, I don't know if you really should want to buy it, because it just kind of is random middle ground. It's very much for people who are trying to establish a whole run of all of X-Men. So then we have Inferno. And this is not Uncanny X-Men, and not X-Factor, and not New Mutants. It's all of the other tie-in books to Inferno. Inferno was not Marvel's first event where they had a lot of books tie in, because as we saw with Secret Wars 2, plenty of books tied into that, and there were a few other things between then and here, although we're not yet up to Acts of Vengeance. But Inferno was one of the first times that a status quo in one book reverberated across the line in other books. Of course, this famously was engineered originally by DC in what were called Red Skies tie-ins to the Crisis on Infinite Earths, where there was no actual tie-in in an issue to Crisis, but the skies were red in the background, and that was meant to signify it was happening around the same time as Crisis. But that's like a little bit of a cop-out, because people would like get the book and be like, where's my tie-in? And the only tie-in was the Red Sky. This is not just Red Sky. All of New York City has been infected by demons that have been brought on by the Goblin Queen, and also by kind of like a infraction into limbo, as they're trying to come and turn Earth into their permanent limbo. I don't know. It's been a really long time since they've read Inferno. But a lot of other teams are affected. Power Pack is affected, the Avengers, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, in multiple titles, Daredevil, and Cloak and Dagger, and also Excalibur, who actually, I guess, are briefly in New York at the time, even though they're usually based in the UK. So this is not essential to reading Inferno. There are like a couple of little threads in here that are a little bit interesting to what's happening in Inferno, but the main Inferno hardcover tackles everything that you need to know in that main story. Now, what's interesting is that as Marvel has been reissuing some of this material in trade paperback, they've kind of been playing a game of like where, if something really counts as part of the main Inferno or if it counts as one of the tie-ins. But what's interesting about these books taken together, and considering the Inferno book that would go in between them on the shelf, is that this is a period that Marvel had been collecting all of X-Factor and New Mutants and Uncanny X-Men together. It starts in Mutant Massacre, they continued it in Fall of the Mutants, and it continues to here. So everybody assumes that when we get a gap filler from between Mutant Massacre and Fall of the Mutants, that it's also going to collect all three titles, because then we will have an unbroken run from X-Men 210 all the way to 280 at the end of the Chris Claremont omnibuses, and then further than that, but I'm just talking about the Claremont era. From X-Factor, this starts from X-Factor 9, and we'll have X-Factor all the way through 70, although we need another gap-filling OHC to make that happen. And New Mutants we'd have from 46, and we too could have New Mutants all the way through 100 if they would put in one more gap-filling OHC a little bit later in the run, when X-Factor and New Mutants are running against the Claremont-Lee run of X-Men, which is in their own omnibuses. So people are really looking for Marvel to collect the series all together to kind of keep up this bookshelf format, and that makes sense for the book that would go between that and Fall of the Mutants, because they've continued that theme here. But then you have to wonder, like, what are they going to do to get us to these books that start here? And so then we start to get into the question of how are they going to continue the Uncanny X-Men omnibus line, and are they going to kind of irrevocably push away this idea that they're going to collect all three mutant titles together and just extend collections of X-Men only that will start to repeat the material that's in some of these books, or are they going to gang them all up? And I've written a super ultra mega extensive blog post about that, so you can explore your options, which I will put in the comments under this video. So now for the ceremonial shelving of Inferno Prologue and Inferno crossovers, which means we are 9 shelves out of 20 done this unpacking project. And I'm going to actually move some things here, because these belong up here. There we go. All right, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Crushing Comics. Come back next time as we continue to work through the rest of my bundled up comic books. You can't even see that many on screen right now, but there's still a lot left to go. So come back next time for even more. Thanks so much.